My name is Matt Roberts. I work in government affairs for the Americas and Europe at the Methanol Institute. Definitely want to reach out and thank everyone again for joining us today. It's great to see this many people interested in what is going on with methanol and also what is going on in alternative transportation in general as well. I have the pleasure today of introducing our panel that is going to be talking about avenues for fuel competition and talking about some of the actual activities that are going on in real-world scenarios around the world. The first person that we're going to start with today is Peter Ward. Peter has done a lot of work around methanol. He was part of the California Energy Commission, worked there for years, and was one of the principal leads on doing methanol fuel blending there. Peter is currently the principal at Alternative Fuel Advocates, LLC, which is a public affairs consultancy that emphasizes transportation, energy policy, and business development. But we'll go ahead and introduce Peter here, and he can talk about some of his past experience and what he sees as the market today. Peter?
Good morning, everybody. I'm really pleased to be here. I want to thank the sponsors, of course, Methanol Institute, for having me here. This is, as my fellow Californian Dan Sperling mentioned, this is deja vu all over for me. I started working in methanol in about 1980, so we're over about 32 years now. And I just, as Matt mentioned, I retired from the Energy Commission after 34 and a half years. What people usually don't know is that I started when I was 12, and so at least I wish I had. But I'm really pleased to be here. This is a topic that I was very fortunate to be in a place at the time when methanol was first introduced. Actually, it was one of the first alternative fuels that really had come into being. After the petro shocks in the 70s, we had to find a way to displace petroleum as best we can. I have continued in that role to try and displace petroleum, try and improve the environment, and to try and improve our energy and national security for the United States and for California. I have retired. I am now a principal with the newly formed Alternative Fuels Advocates, LLC. I'm pleased to be here and speaking in that role, but I'm going to relate some of the past history that we enjoyed in the methanol program. As I mentioned, I am from California. I don't know that I can shake it up as much as my academic friend Daniel Sperling did just in his question in the last session, but I'm going to try, and at least it'll be a little bit more, it'll be provocative, and I hope it'll be interesting. California often is associated with an island. This is a very early map. This is not present day. Sometimes when I use this slide, because of California's reputation, people say, "Oh, can we vote now?" Actually, I'm very proud to be a native Californian, and I'm happy to present here from the nation perspective of California. The origins and the first steps of the methanol program started in legislation in 1980. It authorized the demonstration of methanol in California, and we started out with very low-end blends in Honda Civics at 5, 10, and 15%, both ethanol and methanol at the time. This was just the first rudimentary experiments in alternative fuels and alternative liquid fuels. Those eventuated into M95, M90. We did some different configurations of the fuel at the time, and eventually went to the M85 and the Ford Escorts program. Those were dedicated Ford Escorts, and many times we because of the lack of infrastructure, we often talk about that being a technical success, but an emotional failure. Because people in the limited number of vehicles had an even more limited number of fueling stations. So they felt a little trapped if they weren't able to fuel those vehicles in a manner that was proximal and convenient to their needs. These early vehicles were carbureted, and prior to widespread fuel injection, material compatibility issues started to rise in those days, and I know there was a little bit of a mention about the corrosivity of methanol. It's still with us, but then I think we have learned an awful lot. As a matter of fact, I had firsthand experience in learning about the material compatibility issue for methanol in the larger demonstration as we went forward. We did perform a joint study. I'm happy to see that one of the instrumental people in that study is here with us. It's Dr. Paul Webben from the South Coast Air Quality Management District, and recently retired as I did. He was instrumental in those days of the global supply study that we performed. We wanted to make sure that there would be adequate amount of methanol should this be taken up. The supply potential, the technical feasibility, and the commercial viability were all considered favorable at the time, and that was when oil price was much lower than it is today. My role in all of this, as I said, I felt very, very honored and privileged to be at the right time, at the right place to help with this. And so my focus was the establishment of methanol fueling stations around the state. I was very pleased to be able to participate in that. It was challenging. I was just out of grad school, but this landed on my plate, and I took it up with the zeal that I had. We initially established 17 stations with independent oil companies because the major oil companies were really not interested at that time. I think they felt that their absence would basically put this away. It didn't. The second retail network involved all all 7 majors at that time. Of course, we have fewer of those now. But after coming out of grad school, I thought this was my third round of education in negotiating agreements with the 7 major oil companies for the distribution and dispensing of methanol. We did achieve 54 retail stations with the various oil companies, ARCO, Chevron, Mobil, Exxon, Shell, Texaco, and Ultramar. I still have that memory of all those names. We did establish a California Fuel Methanol Reserve. I was the first administrator and actually the only administrator of that. What we tried to do was establish a stable and secure supply of a chemical commodity at that time for a fuel use. And I think we were very successful at that because we were able to negotiate a charter that would basically allow the oil companies and, say, bus district properties to have the methanol at a price that was roughly equivalent to gasoline. And I think we did achieve that. The Energy Commission served as the administrator as an interested party, arm's length. We did establish this charter to avoid antitrust concerns. So we would basically canvass the users to find out what their needs were for supply. And then we dealt with the methanol suppliers and provided that supply at convenient locations, terminals basically in northern and southern California, and met their needs. We also, and this is probably the key, we as the independent third party arm's length established the pricing of methanol compared to before reformulated gasoline, unleaded regular gasoline, and the air quality benefits associated with methanol as compared to that unleaded regular gasoline. The auto oil problem resolution team was formed, and this was to address some of the material compatibility issues that were surfacing with the dispensing infrastructure that we were establishing. We did establish these cooperative agreements with the major oil companies. We were finding, though, that to use existing gasoline dispensing components, they were not robust enough for the dispensing and distribution of methanol. And that includes everything from the tank, the underground lines, through the dispenser, the hose, even the nozzles. We were using aluminum nozzles. Aluminum's too soft a metal. We found some of the internals in the dispensers were too soft. We found that gasoline was being dispensed through black rubber hoses. We found some of that hose material in the filters and in the filters and fuel pumps of the vehicles. So this was a problem that we really did need to resolve. It was taken up We had regular meetings with both the auto companies and the oil companies. I have to say that the auto companies took a larger interest in this than the oil companies, and this started to become a trend. Once we agreed with the oil companies, it was pretty much benign neglect. They went ahead and said, yes, you can use our stations. It's not our fuel. We don't really have anything to do with it. It's the Energy Commission of the state of California's. So we had to come in and help resolve this. I'm pleased with the success that we had in overcoming that issue. We worked with some brilliant people in the auto companies, and we worked with material suppliers as well, so that I think the nature and of the components of the dispensing industry for gasoline were improved considerably by this. A lot of the components that we came up with then are now used every day in the gasoline distribution, especially as we have different additives and, of course, ethanol in our gasoline now. So we don't really have the attack of any of the fuels. I think the systems are much more robust on gasoline now. I think we're really well prepared for another wave of potential methanol, fuel methanol, in our dispensing systems. The legislation that established this program called for 5,000 fuel-flexible vehicles to be established in California, and that's what we were building those stations for. I'm pleased to say that the sales of those vehicles was very robust. We were up to over 15,000 vehicles when the demonstration program ended. And I think it really did change the landscape in California. As I said, this is one of the first alternative fuels that was produced and in active demonstration use in California. I think it was eminently successful, though you may hear from others that the methanol program was a failure. I can point to many successes. As I mentioned, the robust nature of the distribution system is much improved now. One thing that is overlooked is that the major oil companies, based on the active demonstration of all the young, wide-eyed individualists that were in this army of early methanol development, I guess if we'd known what we were up against, we probably wouldn't have leaped into it. But I'm happy to say that the oil companies volunteered to reformulate their gasoline, and they hardly ever do that. But they did that based on the threat that methanol was going to come their way, and they would have to distribute methanol. So I'm really pleased to say I think that was a major success, one that was the equivalent of taking about 3.5 million vehicles off the road in California for the emissions benefit. The autos changed from methanol to ethanol in the mid-90s, just at a time where the auto companies were saying, well, we'll go from fleets to the general public. And then the ethanol siren song, they heard that loudly, and they went and switched their vehicles out to be running on ethanol instead of methanol, and that's where we are today. That's the challenge, but that is also the opportunity that still exists for methanol, in my opinion. And I think the open fuel standard, or as I like to say, instead of the renewable fuel standard, which is pretty much on the shoals, I would say, with the lack of available cellulosic ethanol in our country, and we keep revising the expectations for cellulosic ethanol. I think we need to open this up. If we're truly, truly serious about our national security problem, and energy is at the forefront of that, I think we need to change it to an alternative fuel standard, all in. All the alternatives can play. I think they all need to play to displace the amount of gasoline and diesel that we get from petroleum. I'm pretty bullish on that. That to me, I won't be convinced otherwise, probably. Here are just some relics from my attic. This was what really started. It was the clean coal fuel study. This is circa 1981. It hasn't held up nearly as well as I have, but nevertheless, you get the idea. This was the report of the 3-agency task force. Something that was very unique in California was the coming together of 3 distinct agencies, one local agency, one small air quality management district in Southern California. the largest in the nation, by the way, and its representative was Paul Webben. We had the California Air Resources Board and folks like Tom Caquette and people that you may know, and the California Energy Commission, who I was part of that team, and it was really led by Chuck Embrecht, who was a great mentor to me and the program. He was one of our first chairmen at the Energy Commission. But during this effort, there were many other people that I'd like to recognize now, and they were good. They became very good friends. Harry Buchanan from the methanol industry, Chuck Embrecht, as I say, one of the first chairs of the Energy Commission. Dr. Roberta Nichols from Ford was instrumental in changing the nature of the methanol as we were in the vehicles to fuel-flexible vehicles. Charles Gray at the US EPA, and again, he's probably going to let this go to his head, but my friend and colleague, Paul Webben. These folks were all instrumental in this effort, and I was fortunate to be there. This is the methanol fueling guide, because you really needed to inform people where to get the fuel. This is a bit of an anachronism. You can see it is a printed document. Remember those? It was in a binder. We had these printed. Every vehicle that we sold in California, the fuel flexible vehicle on methanol M85, had one of these in the glove box. So you could find all the retail stations in the network. This is an actual sign that I have in my possession at home. You can see it was actually in use on a road sign. It's got the nicks of being too close to the freeway. But this is the actual sign that we started and tried to designate where those methanol stations were. I think it had great promise then. I think it has great promise now for a host of reasons. I'm from California, and I do agree. I agree with that fact, and I'm not sure that that I'm going to agree with everybody else from California, apparently. Conclusions on fuel methanol. It's viable for FFE use then and now. A technical success led to the fuel ethanol E85 success. Materials compatibility was addressed successfully, leading to improved materials in all fuels distribution. Domestic natural gas resource expansion can reset the viability and immediate transition from petroleum fuels with increased renewability profile that methanol from renewable sources can bring us. It's the nearest term, scalable, affordable, liquid alternative fuel option for the United States to realistically meet the RFS or the OFS or the alternative fuel standard, as I mentioned, and in a meaningful way. Incentives, mandates for vehicle conversions, simple for existing FFEs, which was pointed out earlier. Fuel distribution, storage, and dispensing systems, modifying existing but not necessarily replacing existing fuel tanks and distribution lines is possible. Substantial research and commercial demonstrations showed no showstoppers in those days. It just was basically a change of heart by the auto companies to switch from methanol to ethanol. I would say, though, that I'm happy to hear that the industry is fully behind this. When we were working in this, we had a few methanol suppliers at the time that were really basically used to providing a chemical commodity and really had not had experience in the distribution of fuels on a large scale. And I really think that is not to be understated. That is absolutely critical to shift the thinking from providing a pure 99.59s chemical pure methanol for a fuel application. We also found if you could make it a little less pure, it might actually cost more. And so we didn't think we needed the 5.9s, but this is something I would implore the industry to take it and think seriously about the fuel application of this. And don't think chemical so much anymore, but how are you going to introduce this fuel on a widespread basis into the existing fuel market? It is a different game. Fuel methanol is easily assimilated into the liquid transportation system, fuel supply and distribution network with the right resolve. And fossil fuel methanol holds very attractive pricing as compared to ethanol or gasoline. and as I mentioned earlier, is the pathway to increased renewability. You know, all the alternative fuels now, I think the main idea is to get off of petroleum. Petroleum, I think, is one of the single most threatening aspects to our economy and our national security. It was then, it is now, and I think we really need to be about the business of changing that. I think methanol, fuel methanol, fossil for now. I don't think we leap from petroleum to removing all fossils. You have to go from petroleum to fossil to renewability. I think that's the proper loading order to improve the fuels as we go forward. This is kind of a concept that I came up with because I've got kind of a simple mind and I need stick figures and actually a target. This is coming from my recent experience of being the program manager for the Alternative and Renewable Fuel and Vehicle Technology Program in California. And you know, all of the talk about the low carbon fuel standard, the renewable fuel standard, and all of that, basically I think we really need to continue our focus to be reducing petroleum. If you reduce petroleum in the center, you gain the attributes that are around this wheel: GHG reduction, criteria emission reduction, increased alternative fuel use, which provides competition in a non-competitive fuels market that exists now. You get economic development from the state and local level all the way up nationally, and advanced vehicle technology development. I don't look at this every day. I've pretty much got it in my mind, but I do think that we need to focus on reducing petroleum and the threat from economic and from a national security standpoint that petroleum provides. That's, I think, one of the main reasons for us to be here today, and I'd like to see us go forward with that goal in mind. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Peter. So what we've talked about so far is, you know, the experience that Peter and also Paul Webben, who'll be speaking a little bit later today about some new ventures he's involved in, you know, that demonstrated getting these vehicles on the road, putting the infrastructure in place is all perfectly feasible. There aren't technical barriers to do this. It's really willpower that kind of determines, you know, whether or not it will continue to be done. But what we have seen is halfway across the world, in China, this has been continued. And that's why we've been very fortunate at the Methanol Institute to have an ongoing relationship with many of the people who are working in China on these projects. I did want to acknowledge a couple of people who are here with us today before I introduce our next speaker. Governor Pang, who has come to the United States a few times to come and join us and learn about many of the projects here. He works with CAAEFA, which is the Chinese Alcohol and Ether and Fuels Association, and has done a lot of work with them. And he is also joined today by our next speaker, who is Mr. Wang Maolin. And Mr. Wang Maolin is going to be presenting to us today in Mandarin, but we're going to have it translated by Mr. Xu. So you'll be doing the translation for us as well. Perfect. Go ahead, sir.
各位女士、各位先生、朋友们，大家上午好。非常有机会能参加这个华盛顿甲醇政策这个论坛。首先呢，允许我代表中国生产力学会、中国石油和化学联合会、屯密燃料专委会、清洁汽车燃料专委会向大会呢表示祝贺。今天呢，我主要讲两个问题。第一个问题呢，想谈一下这个全球由于这个气候的这个变暖，对新能源、清洁能源、屯密燃料的发展和对策。第二个问题呢，专门介绍一下中国，特别山西省发展甲醇燃料的情况。为了节省时间，请允许我的助理许先生来宣读我的英文讲话稿。
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, good morning. It is a great pleasure for me to be invited to attend the Methanol Policy Forum in Washington, D.C. today. Hereon, on behalf of Chinese Association of Productivity Science and China Association of Alcohol and Ether Clean Fuels and Automobiles, and the China Petroleum and Chemical Industry Federation, I would like to wish the forum a great success. On this occasion, I would like to talk about my views and understanding from two aspects: the global developing tendency of clean energy, new energy, and alcohol ether fuel, and the basic situation of developing methanol fuel in China, especially in Shanxi Province. For saving time, please allow me to ask my assistant, Mr. Xu, to read my speech. Part 1. Basic judgment and understanding on global environment and development tendency of developing clean energy, new energy, and alcohol ether fuel. We all know that environmental consciousness and environmental quality is an important sign to measure the level of civilization of a country and a nation. At present, with ceaseless advance of the course of industrialization and modernization, excess GHG is exhausted because of human activity, especially excess exploitation and utilization of fossil energy. The earth is hard to bear it. It is an undeniable fact that global climate has become warm since 1750. Climate warming has triggered global environmental scourge such as extreme climate, acid rain, ozone depletion, greenhouse effect, glacial ablation, sea level rise, desertification, and alternately happening of serious drought and flood. With continuous increasing of population and acceleration of industrialization and urbanization, consumption of energy, land, and water resource increasing sharply. It causes poor life of 880 million people, and about 2.3 billion people are living in water deficient areas. Dysentery, dengue, and other infectious diseases directly threaten human health and life safety. Meanwhile, some species on the earth are near extinction. The greatly changed global climate and the problem of ecological environment have constituted a serious threat to survival of the world body of mankind, as well as to sustainable development of economy. We can say that the world's environmental conditions are still severe. Environmental resources problems still stand out, and the pressure of ecological environment is continuously increasing. Over more than 30 years of reform and open up in China, the economy has been developed at an unprecedented continuous high speed, and the people's living standard have been improved remarkably. However, together with developing of economy, our environmental problem is extremely serious because of various reasons such as pattern of growth, supervised mode, legal system, and ideological understanding. The charge value of main pollutants has substantially exceeded bearing capacity of environment. Environmental pollution is quite serious. About 70% of river systems in our country are polluted in varying degrees. About 1/3 of country lands are covered by acid rain. Air pollution is quite serious too. Sandstorm sheltering sky left us an unforgettable memory. The important reason led to serious consequence is that we have gone through an extensive growing mode of high growing, high pollution, high consumption, low quality, and low effectiveness during the process of development. Though this growing process is difficult to avoid from an objective perspective, and many developed countries had the same experience, the lesson is extremely profound, and the cost is horrendous. From practice of economic growth over more than 30 years, the Chinese government is more and more soberly aware that environmental issues have serious influence on sustainable development of China. And sustainable development is exactly to promote harmony between man and nature, to realize coordination between economic development and the population, resource and the environment, to insist civilized developing way for developing problem and living in plenty and a good ecology, and to ensure continuous development from one generation to another. The Chinese government is deeply aware that it is the scientific and right choice only to protect ecological environment, change economical development pattern, and develop new energy, clean energy, and eco-ether fuel. The China National Plan to respond to climate change has already been formally unveiled. The relative supporting policies for developing methanol and other eco-ether fuels will be unveiled with it by the Chinese government. I think that the Washington Methanol Policy Forum is an important conference. Numerous profound historic lessons in economic phylogenies of mankind and severe environmental reality warn us that never to obtain temporary rapid expansion with sacrifice of environment and life condition of mankind. The production, living, and resource environment of mankind is an associate whole. While stressing economic development, it has already become a consensus opinion of all social circles in the world to protect resources and environment, save energy, and reduce emission of GHG. Everyone thinks that developing new energy and clean energy is a scientific choice of every country government. Today, we are holding the Methanol Policy Forum in Washington, D.C. to discuss that development of eco-ether fuel is an important composition of clean energy. To develop methanol fuel in China do comply with general trend of the development. Thus, I propose, first, during the process of developing clean energy, new energy, and eco-ether fuels, governments of various countries should adopt supporting and encouraging policy for this purpose. Really drive and promote new development of clean energy, new energy, and eco-ether fuel. Second, developed countries should keep on enhancing science and technology force to break through technical difficulty in the process of developing clean energy, new energy, and eco-ether fuel, and give capital and technical support to developing countries, especially to less developed countries, according to United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Developing countries should proactively support their own country's development of clean energy, new energy, and eco-fuel. Let us join hands to create a well-living environment on the earth where humanity is living. Second part, basic information on developing methanol fuel in China, especially in Shanxi Province. To use methanol as vehicle fuel in China was inspired by rapid development of methanol-fueled vehicles in the United States in 1990s. Especially in 1995, MIT in the United States, Tsinghua University in China, and Ford Motor Company in the United States joined the Sino-US Experts Joint 3E research with China's Shanxi Province as a main object. That is the evaluation study on the life cycle of economy, environment, and energy utilization to transform coal to methanol fuel. It is essentially a feasibility study. The conclusion is that it is a realistic selection to transform coal to methanol fuel in Shanxi Province and other coal-rich regions. This conclusion has indicated the direction to us and affirmed our faith. In China, leaders of Chinese Communist Party and state government, Hu Jintao, Wen Jiabao, and Li Keqiang, all gave important written instructions to developing coal-based alcohol ether fuel. That has created a favorable policy environment for development of coal-based alcohol ether fuel in China, and has important promotion and facilitation effect. The State Council, the National Development and Reform Commission, the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology of Chinese government, governments of relative key provinces and municipalities, professionals, and all social circles all give substantial support. We can say that overall situation for developing alcohol ether fuel industry in China is good. Therefore, Shanxi Province started off and made for taste before the others. We have made exploitation positively and made unremitting efforts for the pilot and the promotion projects of methanol gasoline, that's M15, with deepening of knowing that methanol is a safe, clean, environment protective, and economic alternative fuel, as well as with improvement of technology on blending combustion and R&D of methanol engine. Remarkable achievements of pilot and promotion project have been gained, and a valuable experience has been accumulated. It has made great influence at home and caused high attention of the national government. The national government of China arranged a series of demonstration and pilot projects. Various regions unveiled a series of supporting policies encouraging development of methanol fuel. Thus, methanol alternative fuel is gradually developed. To take this opportunity, I would like to briefly introduce the situation in Shanxi Province, mainly in three aspects. First, Shanxi is the province which sets foot in this field earliest in China. Its R&D, test, industrialization, and promotion for methanol gasoline and methanol new energy automobile reflect current developing situation and level in China. Being driven by the provincial government, research on methanol fuel and methanol automobile was started in 1980 in Shanxi Province. In 1990s, tests and demonstration were carried through item by item. It is spread from point to omni in the 21st century. Significant successes by stage have been achieved through more than 20 years unremitting research, development, and promotion. Main technical obstacles on the way to replace gasoline and diesel with methanol have been basically overcome. 7 local standards on methanol fuel have been prepared and published. Technology for reconstruction of in-use vehicles have been grown. Key breakthroughs on R&D of methanol engine have been achieved. Ash agglomeration gasification furnace has been developed, which is suitable for producing methanol with our province's fault coal of high sulfur and high ash content. That makes the development, the demonstration and operation of methanol fuel and a new energy automobile industrialization in Shanxi Province at domestic leading level. According to the present development trend, Shanxi Province is planning to develop M30 and M50 methanol gasoline to 3 million tons until 2015. Number of reconstructed in-use vehicles will reach 150,000. 50,000 methanol heavy-duty trucks will be newly increased. 100,000 methanol FFV will be developed. Annual consumption of fuel methanol will be 5 million tons. Methanol made of coke oven gas and fault coal will be developed to 10 million tons. It will become a strategic new industry in Shanxi Province. Second, to review promotion situation in provinces and municipality besides Shanxi Province in 2011, and they are Shanghai, Shanxi, Hebei, Henan, Jiangsu, Zhejiang, and Guilin provinces. Methanol gasoline has reached more than 6 million tons, which saved 2.8 million tons of gasoline for the country. We can say that development momentum of methanol fuel and methanol new energy vehicles in China is good. Many years test, demonstration, and participating of exchange and cooperation with international eco-either fuel technology have produced a certain influence internationally. At present, Israel, Pakistan, Malaysia, and so on are discussing cooperation affairs with us. They hope to develop methanol fuel and methanol new energy automobile in their respective country through cooperation and exchange. Third, at the beginning of 2012, the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology confirmed that Shanxi Province and Shanghai Municipality are pilot project region. Managing experience will be accumulated through demonstration operation in those 2 provinces and 1 municipality. Then it will be expanded to other key provinces and municipalities. A regional linked development trend has already formed. Development prospect is good. China is rich of coal but lack of oil. To develop coal-based eco-either fuel as an important alternative energy is a strategic selection to satisfy growing demand for energy in our country and to promote rapid and healthy development of state economic society. In the early 1990s, the United States took the lead in developing methanol new energy automobiles in the world. and drove China, Japan, Germany, and many other countries. The influence was quite big. It has stopped later on because of various objective reasons. We earnestly hope that methanol fuel and methanol new energy automobile will get warm again soon in the United States. We are also expecting to make substantial cooperation on methanol fuel with relative units, organizations, and enterprises who are attending this conference. Finally, I wish the forum a complete success once again. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. Much appreciated. We're going to move on to our next speaker here so we can keep this moving and make it to our lunch session on time as well. We're very thankful to be joined by Matt Brusstar. He came down from Ann Arbor to be here with us today. Matt is the director of the Advanced Powertrain Center at the Environmental Protection Agency, which is based just outside of Detroit. He holds 4 registered patents in the field of internal combustion engine systems, and he continues to work in the development of engines and in controlling emissions. Mr. Brusstar also received his PhD in mechanical engineering from the University of Michigan, and we'll be talking about some of the work that has been continuing in Ann Arbor. Matt?
Thank you, Matt. It's a great honor to be here with distinguished speakers, Peter and Mr. Wang. It's nice to know that I'm the second biggest environmental advocate up here today. It's always a good feeling. I just wanted to open things up with some slides that maybe jump around a little bit, but briefly touch on some key points that I'd like to make regarding methanol in light-duty and heavy-duty vehicles. We've certainly heard a lot lately, and even this morning, of the need for our country to move away from imported oil. And of course, oil imports pose a threat to us in many ways, but I've grouped them into 3 main areas here: economic stability, national security, and environmental protection. As a result of this triple threat, as I call it here on this slide, we experience a harsh and oftentimes hidden burden on our domestic economy. And rather than get into a lot of the general points that I make here in the bullets, I don't think, especially considering the other discussions, that I need to touch upon the economic and national security aspects of this problem so much as I need to point out that meeting these 2 very important objectives can also be consistent with our need for environmental protection. I've seen this occasionally overlooked in this discussion, or maybe just skimmed over, given just a very simple treatment. But I think that going forward, this is going to be a critical aspect of gaining support for any alternative fuel initiative that involves methanol. I mean, first of all, taking leadership on the environment satisfies the current administration's objectives as laid out in the President's energy blueprint. And specifically, I think this means showing leadership on greenhouse gas emissions reductions, as well as taking leadership on methane and toxic substance releases. And I'm glad to see that we're seeing some discussion of that today. Second, we've also seen from recent events like the Keystone XL pipeline, for example, that the public is increasingly placing a high value on safeguarding public health and the environment. And so I think, once again, this is going to be a critical part of getting methanol as a transportation fuel in this country. So my main point today is I think that finding ways to bring methanol into the transportation market using the cleanest and most efficient technologies will be an important part of building its case as a transportation fuel. In my remarks today, therefore, I would like to highlight a few key areas of technology where I think we'll want to focus our efforts. Now, looking forward from where we stand right now, there are a lot of different options on the table as far as transportation fuels. And among the group I show here, methanol can be a key player in the President's all-out, all of the above energy strategy that a few of us have talked about, simply because, number one, it can be produced from a wide variety of feedstocks, as I show here, from gas to biomass, and in the Chinese experience, even from coal. And second, it can be used as is, or as Mark Berggren pointed out this morning, it can be converted to gasoline using well-known chemical processes. And third, it can be utilized very efficiently using today's vehicle technology. And I think this is important because there are no significant technology breakthroughs that are required to use methanol efficiently. Now, putting these three elements together, I think the life cycle impact of methanol will depend, of course, on the feedstock, fuel, and vehicle pathway chosen. But in our estimation anyway, methanol looks very favorable relative to these competing alternatives. And I think this is something that needs to be highlighted more frequently. And of course, in my experience at the lab in Ann Arbor, we've focused historically mainly on just the vehicle part of the life cycle. So that's what I'm going to talk about today, starting with passenger cars. Now, in the light-duty vehicle market, an open fuel standard would seem to present an excellent near-term or mid-term option for providing consumers with lower-cost choices for transportation fuels. And yet, it's seeing fairly broad-based opposition at this point, especially from the automakers. But if we put ourselves in their shoes for a moment, and I just want to play devil's advocate here, why would they not embrace this very readily? Well, first of all, the add-on cost of a methanol-compatible flex-fuel vehicle, as we've heard from a few of the different speakers, is maybe in the range of $200 to $300 per vehicle. And in and of itself, that's probably not a deal breaker. But at the same time, where's the incentive for the automakers to do that? It's really not in their self-interest to just do it. Second, it requires extensive durability testing and qualification of new fuel systems. It entails new engine calibrations for these different fuels, and it requires development of different exhaust aftertreatment systems and formulations. And third, it places an extraordinary burden on vehicle certification, and that's what my chart here is showing. Each year, for those of you not familiar with this, EPA issues about 500 vehicle emissions certificates, and that covers around 1,000 separate car lines that are sold in the United States every year. And as we know, the OFS calls for 95% sales penetration of alt-fuel vehicles. And if you look on this chart at 95%, 95% of each manufacturer's sales is comprised of over 400 different car lines. Now, if we look instead at 50% of sales, and I'd like to point out, 50% of sales is still an enormous number of automobiles. This is made up of only about 70 car lines or so. And so we're talking at least a factor of 6 difference. So my personal takeaway from this is that a target of 95% is probably too big of a burden on the manufacturers. I know some of you will probably disagree with that, but especially when you factor in that you'll also be requiring each vehicle to certify to 3 different fuels, M90 presumably, E85 gasoline. And besides that aspect of it, I think that a 4-year phase-in may also be too aggressive. OEM redesign cycles are typically 5 to 6 years. So this phase-in is somewhat faster than that, and I think it risks getting out ahead of where the autos are right now. So I don't want you to take these comments as being negative. I am just acknowledging that although the OFS may be an important and necessary step, it's also going to be a very difficult one. So, fortunately, on the heavy-duty side, you don't have to rely on something like an OFS. It really takes more of a market-driven approach. And at least initially, it doesn't rely so much on a well-developed refueling infrastructure, as Dan Cohn pointed out earlier, as long as you target a lot of the fleet users. And we have the centrally fueled fleets that return to the same fueling depot time after time. That would include delivery trucks, buses, and refuse trucks, so very large fleets. Others operate along prescribed routes, so you can envision some refueling corridors. Neither of these require extensive infrastructure, and it also, if you're considering a pilot program, you don't have to get buy-in from the oil majors just to support getting some effort off the ground. So I think it's pretty attractive from that aspect. Now, assuming that methanol is cheap, and we've seen enough evidence of that today, and costs are expected to stay low for a long time, then I'd suggest that that you reach out with a clear message and state your case to the heavy-duty fleet owners, because at the very least, I'd say that they're a very highly rational bunch of people. Fuel costs figure very prominently in their bottom line. So if you can develop a strategy to pull together a critical mass of demand within these fleets using fuel costs as a major enticement, I believe, anyway, that they'll find somebody to manufacture the engines that use methanol. In the interactions that we've had so far with the fleets, we've received nothing but positive feedback on the idea of a cheap alternative, and by that I mean specifically methanol. And so in recent years, much like Dan mentioned earlier in his talk, we've concluded that this rational, market-driven, heavy-duty sector is where methanol should make its entry. And so that's where we focused a lot of our attention. So a lot of people know EPA for its regulatory and certification activities, but not everybody knows that we've got a significant engine development program, engine research and development program, and that we've done a substantial amount of work over the years with methanol engines. And going back to the 1980s, I wasn't there as Peter was, but we began looking at methanol as a fuel, starting with some of the early flex fuel vehicles that Peter mentioned. And in the 90s, we began to see more promise in the more efficient dedicated fuel options, so we proceeded along that branch of technology development here. And that became our main focus. Now, over the last decade, after sorting through a number of technology options, some of which I show up there, we see as the two best principal options this spark ignition engine technology, much like what Dan described, maybe with a few differences, but he mentioned certainly that we've been working on that for some time, and the dual fuel diesel methanol engines. And projecting forward, these dual fuel engines could even be paired with a thermochemical exhaust heat recovery system, which would give next level efficiency improvements. And I'd like to show our results with some of these engines. Now, first with the spark ignition engine technology, what we see here is diesel-like efficiency, and I apologize for this, it's a bit of an eye chart, but in the red areas there, we're getting very high efficiency in the 40% range, which is outstanding for an engine of this type. And this presents itself with costs similar to a turbocharged gasoline engine. As Dan had also mentioned, this technology uses a three-way catalyst, much like you find in most passenger cars, and this gives ultra-low emissions at a very reasonable cost, especially in the heavy-duty sector, which sees predominantly this urea SCR after-treatment system. And although we have to acknowledge that the spark ignition technology could see some potential cold start and durability issues. I'd like to point out that engineering solutions to these issues do exist. So none of these are showstoppers, to be sure. Now next, moving on to the dual fuel diesel methanol engine technology, we once again see better than diesel efficiency with no expensive exhaust aftertreatment. We're not using a three-way catalyst technology, but it's much less complex than a urea SCR system. We also, with this concept, get maximum commonality with the base diesel engine platform, since we've not excluded anything from the diesel from the diesel engine, and that fact is very attractive to a lot of the engine manufacturers, and we're seeing some commercial interest in that. And of course, as I mentioned, this technology also has long-term potential for exhaust heat recovery systems. Now, that leads me to my concluding slide here. What's next for methanol? I don't think I have to convince anyone here of the importance of an open fuel standard in light duty. But on the heavy duty side, I think there needs to be some attention to introducing these clean and efficient engine technologies. And I do believe that the technology is there. We just need to identify those early adopters of the technology. And at the same time, we have to mitigate the risk for the potential engine and vehicle manufacturers by providing reasonable long-term assurances of fuel cost and availability. And that concludes my opening remarks. Thank you very much, everybody.
That's perfect. Thank you, Matt, for both for the presentation and for keeping it nice and concise, which is perfect. We do have a few minutes before we move on to our lunch session, so we can take some questions from the audience here. So I guess we can. We'll start right here in the back.
Yeah, question for Mr. Brusstar. I'm Mark Goodman with New West Technologies, LLC. On the light duty side, if a lot of the focus today has been on giving people choices so that they can go from one fuel to the next depending on price and that sort of thing. If that were to happen with going between M85 and gasoline, there would be a significant number of incidences where people end up with a low-level methanol blend in their tank. And without any co-solvent, we're talking about that boosting the RVP 2.5, 3 PSI, which obviously would wreak havoc on EPA's scheme for emissions controls. What thought has been given to that, and what measures to mitigate that are you looking?
Well, first of all, I don't think that there's enough methanol in the fuel supply for us to really raise that as a significant issue at the moment. We recognize that it's there, certainly from the work that we've done over the years, but right now it's not something that's very high on our list of many priorities to address. But in the case that you mentioned, where you have these low-level blends and you have the very high evaporative emissions, the manufacturers would still be able to deal with that by having larger carbon canisters on board the vehicle, that sort of thing. We just have to see the extent to which that could be fully addressed when the issue is raised to a higher level.
Next questions? Yep. Move down and then across.
Yeah, Vikram Rao, Research Triangle Energy Consortium. For Matthew, really two questions. One is, take the dual fuel or the M85 with the spark ignition. You're taking advantage of the higher octane rating. Therefore, the engine is smaller. Can you speak to the general cost, and how does it compare with the previous speaker relative to the cost of the engine? We know what the fuel cost is less. And then the second part question is the previous speaker stated that because it's a cooler burn, 200 degrees he said, I don't know if it's F or C, he intimated that there was a 15% advantage in the calorific penalty. In other words, he intimated that that 50% calorific penalty that we take for methanol really jumps up to 65. Could you comment on the veracity of that? Because if that is true, then we're all using the wrong number. We're using half at this point.
Sure. First of all, in terms of the overall cost of the engine, if you break down the cost of the M85 spark ignition engine that uses a much cheaper fuel injection system than what you see on a diesel engine. Typically, if you're just looking at the engine itself in a diesel engine, the fuel system will make up about 25% of the cost of the engine in rough numbers. It's actually becoming more significant as we're looking at even higher fuel injection pressures and that sort of thing in modern engines. And with the after-treatment systems, the urea SCR systems, as Dan showed in one of his slides, are a significant cost. And if you replace that with a three-way catalyst system, you're talking about something that's thousands of dollars cheaper. So taken in total, you're looking at a package that's significantly cheaper than a diesel engine with very little added complexity. In terms of the dual fuel engine, now you've retained the diesel fuel injection system. Maybe it's a simpler, lower pressure, lower capacity diesel fuel injection system. So maybe there's a marginal decrease there, but you've also, once again, eliminated the need for a urea SCR system in that case, and so it's substantially cheaper. As far as specifics on the cost, that's something that we haven't gone to the rigor of evaluating, so I can't give you an exact number. Now, getting to the calorific value of methanol, methanol has about 50% of the heating value of gasoline. Diesel fuel has an additional 10 to 15% heating value over gasoline, so methanol is about 45% the heating value of diesel fuel. So.
Yeah, but he said there's an effective improvement because of low temperature burn. Is that true?
I don't know. I guess I'm a little confused as to what that means. I'm sure he's probably right, but.
We are going to be running out of time here too. But we do want to go ahead and wrap up this session. Thank you very much to our speakers and presenters for your help here.